And for today's reading, I will read the first chapter from my new publication. It's called The Most Wondrous Lighthouse of Strange Delights. Chapter 1. Rodriguez's Dream. Luis Rodriguez had a dream, a vision, and it spoke to him so powerfully that when he awoke in the morning, he had wet cheeks where his tears had been flowing in the middle of the night. There was something magical about the dream, and it stayed in his mind and would not leave. It was as ridiculous as it was beautiful. And when you have a dream that lingers, you know only too well how difficult it is to let it go. A real dream lingers like a permanent fragrance in the air. And that morning, Luis Rodriguez woke up with the most vivid scent he had ever smelled in his entire life. It reminded him of the scent of fresh herbs his wife used to plant in their garden. Luis Rodriguez had received a vision, and he was certainly someone in need of one. The rest of the day, he had sat on the back porch, observing the springtime flutter of birds. The playful romance of winged creatures made him feel better, despite it reminding him of the time when the love of his life was still alive. Yet since her passing, Luis Rodriguez had been a man of only half a heart, and with a longing so deep it made his boots feel heavy. The other half of his heart, the part that still beat within his chest, belonged to his beloved daughter, Rocío Rodriguez. It wasn't always the case that partners who married already happened to share the same surname, but with the two Rodriguezes, it was an unfortunate but amusing coincidence. Yet, they had reasoned, what better sign did they need to show that they were destined to be together? Rodriguez was just fine. In fact, it was better than fine. And Rocío Rodriguez was even finer. Luis Rodriguez waited for his daughter to return home so he could share his dream with her. More than that, he wanted to tell her what he had decided to do about it. No more easy hours sitting on the porch observing the world pass by. No more idle immersion in the myriad of shapes, sizes, colors, and smells that formed the bubble of his days. Something had awoken inside Luis Rodriguez, and it was calling out to him to engage once again with the world. This sparkle inside wished for him to be his daughter's wayfarer, to be her minstrel, her troubadour and warrior of light, for all those missing a little illumination in their lives. For the first time in a long time, Luis Rodriguez felt an excitement within. It was as if his river of dreams, which had dried up to a trickle after the death of his wife, was now beginning to flow again. The trickle had grown into a small stream, and it was washing away the silt from his insides, making him feel fresher and more alive. Luis Rodriguez smiled to himself. Then he chuckled, and finally he broke out into a huge laugh that echoed out into the vegetable garden among the newly planted onions and between the baby spinach leaves. Finally, His broad laugh came bouncing back and washed over him, engulfing him in newfound joy. Luis Rodriguez jumped out of his chair and leapt around the garden like a child again. It was beautiful. It was all so beautiful. More than that, it seemed so right, and it made so much sense. Papa, that makes no sense at all. His daughter Rothea looked up at him. Her deep dark eyes squinted in her oval face. She looked at her father, trying to fathom some meaning. I know it sounds, well, a little odd, said her father. Odd? It's more than odd, it's downright crazy, Papa. Rothea did her best to keep a calm voice, so as not to upset her father. She knew he needed a dream, something to keep his spirit alive, something to make him feel a living part of the world. But this? But isn't it beautiful? Her father let out another chuckle, like he couldn't help it. It had just risen in his throat, and like the best of escape artists, it had pushed through his mouth and through the thin space between his lips. His eyes twinkled, two brown polished orbs glistening. It was as if they were trying their very best to sparkle influence Rothea into believing in his plans. Rothea regained her composure. Was her father going mad? She had never seen him like this before. It was good that he was so animated, so alive, but it was like he had swallowed some brain-fuzzy pill that made him all giddy. I'll make us some dinner, Papa, and then you just relax. Rothea walked into the kitchen and began to prepare a light evening meal. It was not every 33-year-old girl who lived at home, yet Rothea had chosen to move back to keep an eye on her father. She had placed her deft cooking skills to good use, keeping her father fully fed and, considering all things, reasonably happy. A house is just not a home without a woman's presence, reasoned Rothea. And in that, like many things, she was right. For Rothea had a keen mind, a small frame, but a big, wide-open heart that could catch the tiniest of lost, stray particles as they floated past. Rothea was always caring for the lost, whether they were lost frogs, caterpillars, or the small salamanders that crawled into the house to hide behind the picture frames. Maybe they didn't want to be found, preferring instead to hide unnoticed in the shadows. But ever since she was a young girl, Rothea had made a point of finding these lost salamanders and bringing them back to the light of day. Rothea had many friends in the garden of her youth, of all shapes, sizes, colors, and shades. That night she made a special dish of soft potatoes, lightly marinated in lemon with a dash of basil, a dish she knew her father loved. And that we're going to have to get around it. Okay, ready? That night, she made a special dish of soft potatoes, lightly marinated in lemon with a dash of basil, a dish she knew her father loved. And that night she blew extra love into the potatoes, in the hope that the breath of her heart would help to unwind the spell of craziness in her father's mind. The next morning, Rothea found her father busying himself in his study, a pile of papers lying on his untidy desk. By the look of him, she guessed he had been up either most of the night or since very early in the morning. Such behavior was most unusual. He must really be taking his dreams seriously, thought Rothea. and that may not necessarily be a good thing or anything. Rothea brought in the toast drenched in olive oil, sure to get her father's fingers all greasy. It was a Saturday morning, so oily fingers were acceptable. "Ah, Rotheo, a beautiful new day," exclaimed her father as he bounced over to her. "I've been working on the first design. I thought it best to start from the bottom up instead of the top." "Always a good idea to start at the beginning," said Rotheo, with a wise warning look that only observant women can make. "Ah, yes, sure, of course. Start where we mean to go on. Start solid and then build tall." "And how tall do you plan for this lighthouse of yours to be?" Rotheo thought it best to seem to be going along with the plan. Any disruption now may only bring back her father's heavy air of despondency that had been hovering over him for far too long. Her father paused. The mind of Luis Rodriguez was churning over data the way only an architect's mind can. You see, the mind of an architect is different from other minds. Some minds think in squares, others in straight lines. There are even those minds that think in curvy bends that can go around corners. Yet an architect's mind thinks in 3 spatial dimensions with mathematical numerals flashing through, just like birds fluttering between trees. The next thing an architect's mind has to ask is, can it work? They rarely, however, get to the question of, how much will it cost? Cost, you see, is a thing for other minds, the type of minds that think in zeros and ones with a few dots thrown in for good measure. 62 feet, said her father, eventually. Besides, it's not the height that really counts, it's how bright it is. The secret is in the illumination, not in the bricks. Sure, Papa, but why 62 feet? A faint smile appeared on her father's face. If it wasn't for his mustache, Luis Rodriguez's face would have looked childlike. The hair he proudly wore above his top lip was a guard against his boyish charm. It is the number of years your dear mother illuminated her own light upon this world. Rotheo sighed. She missed her mother desperately, more than all the winged creatures in the world, more than all the 4-legged friends, 2-legged lovers, and more than every sweet word her father used to whisper to her as a child. But that was life, however you looked at it. And Rotheo knew that life had its own task ready in wait for her, as soon as she had sorted out her father. Papa, I'm neither an architect nor an octogenarian, so please tell me properly, how high is 62 feet? Luis Rodriguez sighed. Ah, the youth. Well, it's about 19 meters, more or less. Thanks, Papa. Rotheo left the room, leaving her father to get on with the inevitable job of greasy fingering his new drawing papers. She went outside to clear her mind a little. Standing under the rays of sunshine, she looked for the neighbour's cat that always tended to wander in around this time. Sure enough, Nico the cat could be seen sauntering amidst the pines, on the lookout for inobservant mice. Good, thought Rotheo, at least something is still normal around here. Luis Rodriguez was not to be dissuaded. He was now a man inflamed with a dream so vivid that he could still feel it burning iridescent behind his eyes. All weekend he had worked with animated energy, producing sketch after sketch of how his lighthouse would look. This was much to the agitation of Rotheo, who took care of everything else. When Sunday evening arrived, Luis Rodriguez found his daughter sitting on the back porch, reading a book. I think I've got it, he said. pushing a handful of papers into her lap. Rotheo looked at the grease-finger-marked papers. Got what? The lighthouse, of course. It's going to be the most wondrous lighthouse the world has ever seen. Her father beamed at her as if he were the king of Persia. Yes, Papa, a lighthouse is all good and fine, but why in the desert? Why did your dream tell you to build a lighthouse in the desert? I know, how crazy it may sound. Even I didn't believe the dream at first, but then, well, it's brilliant. Don't you see? It's the perfect place. It has to be there. Luis Rodriguez clapped his hands together as if he were expecting a white dove to fly out of them. But Papa, nobody puts a lighthouse in the desert. There's no need for one there. You put them in or near the water to show people where the rocks are. That's what a lighthouse is for. Luis Rodriguez shook his head and bent down closer to his daughter. No, my dear, it isn't like that. A lighthouse in the water is for the visible things of this world. It is to show people what is already there. But a lighthouse in the desert is a different story. It is to help people see what is not usually visible in their lives. To show people not what they ordinarily see, but what they ordinarily don't see. That's what a true light is for. This lighthouse is for the human heart. It is not for the eyes. Rotheo felt something stir within her, something she had not felt for a long time, not since her mother had passed away. She felt that sense of meaning, of purpose, that makes you know that not only is something worth doing, but that it can be done, no matter how crazy it may seem. And now she began to understand just a little of what her father was feeling. It was the giddy pill she had just swallowed, and it felt very, very good. Rotheo looked into her father's eyes and saw a twinkle that almost brought a tear to her own. Luis Rodriguez came closer and whispered in his daughter's ear, just like he used to do when she was just a baby. We are not building something new. We are restoring something that is old, very, very old. Rotheo looked up into the deep-set eyes of her father. Are you sure about this? Her father nodded his head and smiled. Okay, Papa, said Rotheo softly. Let's make it happen. The most wondrous lighthouse of strange delights.